Commander Kale Draven had lived through 15 relentless years of interstellar conflict by clinging to 3 survival rules: never let your guard down, trust sparingly, and keep your heart detached from anything you might have to abandon. Yet as he stood in the crowded port of Zera Prime, watching violet-skinned Sci-Fi civilians sneak wary glances at him, he had the unsettling sense that this assignment would strain every one of those rules. His comm implant crackled to life with the voice of Lieutenant Eris Vey. "Commander, we've got a developing problem in the industrial zone. 3 Sci-Fi children reported missing, ages 4 through 8. Local security is requesting Terran assistance." Kale's stomach sank. Missing children during a fragile ceasefire was precisely the kind of spark that could ignite war again. "Any idea whose kids?" "That's the catch, sir," Eris said grimly. "They're not just anyone's. They're the Empress's daughters. Princess Elora, Princess Nira, and Princess Sarah. 8, 6, and 4. Kale froze mid-step, forcing a merchant with crystalline cargo to swerve around him. "Tell me you're exaggerating." "Wish I was." The girls slipped away from their tutor during a cultural tour and vanished into the industrial grid. "Outstanding," Kale muttered, quickening his stride toward the maze of factories. "So we're searching for 3 royal children in a death trap designed for machines, not families." "Pretty much, sir. And the Empress is furious." He didn't need to be told. Empress Vey Elora's reputation as a fiercely protective mother had carried across half the galaxy. Losing her daughters under Terran supervision could undo years of diplomacy overnight. The industrial sector stretched for kilometers, a labyrinth of repair hangars and cargo vaults that hummed with automated machinery. It was exactly the kind of place where adventurous children could vanish, or worse. Where would 3 palace-raised girls go exploring? Kale murmured, scanning rows of sealed containers. The answer revealed itself in an abandoned cargo warehouse, a derelict block with its doors half broken, a place that to a soldier looked like a ruin, but to children must have resembled a fortress. Inside, tucked behind a stack of crates, the 3 princesses huddled together. They were shivering, their eyes red from crying, yet holding themselves with the brittle bravery of those too young to admit fear. The eldest, Elora, noticed him first. Her violet skin had paled to lilac with cold, and strands of tangled crimson hair clung to her cheeks. Still, her gaze carried a dignity that felt far older than her 8 years. "Are you here to take us home?" she asked softly. "Yes," Kale answered, hands open and weapon holstered. "I'm Commander Kale Draven, Terran Marines. Your mother sent me." "Our mama's really worried, isn't she?" Nira whispered, eyes huge with guilt. "Very worried," Kale said, kneeling to their level. "But mostly she wants you safe. Are any of you hurt?" Elora tightened her arm around little Sarah. She scraped her knee when she fell. "And we're all hungry." Kale handed out compact rations from his field kit, designed to be edible across species. As they nibbled cautiously, he assessed the risk: night falling, security weak, and 3 Imperial children relying entirely on him. By training, he should have called for immediate extraction. But one look at shivering Sarah wrapped in a thin blanket, and Kale made a choice his instructors would have condemned. "We're staying here tonight," he announced, settling against a wall. Nira frowned. "Won't we get in trouble?" "I'll take the blame," Kale said simply. "Right now, you need rest, food, and warmth. I'll keep watch." "That's silly," Sarah said bluntly, as only 4-year-olds could. "You'll get sleepy. We can help." Despite the tension, Kale chuckled. "That's very kind, but I can handle one night." Hours passed. The girls peppered him with questions about his homeworld, his family, and why stars looked different from Zera's twin suns. They shared stories of their father, long gone to war, and their favorite games inside the palace gardens. Gradually, drowsiness won. Elora curled against his side, Nira pressed against his other arm, and Sarah sprawled across his lap, clutching his uniform as though it were her shield. For a man who had spent years building walls around his emotions, Kale felt those defenses crumble. They weren't symbols of empire or political risks. They were just children who needed someone to guard them. And as Sarah murmured something in Sci-Fi that sounded like safe now, Kale realized that some bonds were worth the danger. Dawn was near when he woke to the low hum of hovercraft engines closing in. For a heartbeat, disoriented by the weight of the three small bodies, Kale thought enemies had found them. Then the warehouse doors blasted inward with precise force, and armored Sci-Fi Imperial guards stormed inside, weapons trained on him with terrifying efficiency. And behind them, radiating authority like a storm-given form, strode Empress Veilora herself. Her violet skin glowed faintly, her flowing crimson hair catching the pale light. She was breathtaking, and furious. "Step away from my daughters," she commanded, her voice laced with harmonics that made his bones tremble. Kale didn't move. With the girls still asleep against him, sudden motion seemed reckless. "Your Majesty," he said carefully. "They're safe. I found them last night." The Empress's golden eyes narrowed, her fury tempered only by the sight of her children sleeping peacefully in the arms of a human soldier. The accusation in Empress Veelora's eyes hit Kale harder than any battlefield wound. Her daughters were nestled against him as though he were part of their family, and though his instincts screamed to defend himself, he held still. Moving too fast around frightened children and an enraged mother would be suicide. "I can see what you found," Veilora said, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "What I want to know is why a Terran soldier is holding my daughters as if they belong to him." Kale swallowed the surge of defensive anger. She wasn't wrong. He had held them close, comforted them, protected them as if they were his own. And the raw truth in that made his voice softer than he expected. "Because they were cold, Your Majesty. Because Sarah scraped her knee and needed someone to hold her. Because Nero was terrified of disappointing you and needed reassurance. Because Elora was trying to be brave but is still just 8 years old. They needed someone, and I was here." Something flickered in the Empress's expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. "You know their names," she murmured. "They told me about their lessons, their favorite foods, their father. I told them about my homeworld, about siblings, about why you love them enough to send half your army to find them." At the sound of voices, Elora stirred. Blinking awake, she spotted her mother and gasped. "Mama!" Relief blossomed across her face, quickly shadowed by guilt. "We're sorry. Commander Kale kept us safe all night." Nira lifted her head, clutching Kale's sleeve. "He gave us food and blankets. He promised nothing bad would happen." The youngest woke last. Still groggy, Sarah wrapped her arms tighter around Kale's neck. "Too loud," she mumbled, glaring at the guards. "Scary people." "It's okay, Princess," Kale soothed, adjusting her against his chest. "They're Mama's guards. They're here to take you home." "No," Sarah's small voice rang with stubbornness. "Don't want to go. Want to stay with Captain Kale. He makes the nightmares go away." The silence that followed was absolute. Dozens of Sci-Fi soldiers watched, waiting for their Empress's command, yet Kale could feel the shift in the air. 3 children declaring their trust in him had unsettled the entire balance of the moment. "Captain Kale," Veilora said, stepping closer, her tone softening though her authority remained. "My daughters believe you can protect them. Do you truly think you can?" "I already have," Kale replied evenly. "And I'll keep doing it as long as I breathe." Veilora studied him, golden eyes unblinking, weighing something far heavier than words. Finally, she said, "Then you will come with us. To the palace. For their sake." The order carried no room for argument. The guards lowered their weapons, and Kale found himself swept into an imperial procession unlike any mission briefing could have prepared him for. The royal transport glided with elegance through the sky lanes, its crystal-paneled interior gleaming with wealth. Elora peppered him with questions about Terran fleets. Nira showed him glittering hollow images of palace gardens. And Sarah, of course, refused to leave his lap, snuggled into his chest as though he were her anchor. Across from him, Empress Vealora watched with a gaze both sharp and unreadable. Not suspicion exactly, but not full trust either. Something caught between. "Commander Draven," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the girl's chatter. "I hope you understand the gravity of what you've stepped into. This is not a babysitting duty. You've walked into the beating heart of an empire." Kale nodded, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'm beginning to understand, Your Majesty. But some things are worth the complication." He looked down at the little one asleep on his shoulder, then at the other two arguing over whether human or sci-fi starships were faster. "Like making sure children feel safe. Everything else, we'll figure out." For the first time, Vealora's lips curved, not in mockery, but in the smallest hint of a genuine smile. "Commander Kale, you may be more suited to palace life than you realize." Moments later, the spires of the Imperial Palace rose before them, catching the light of Zera's twin suns. Each gleaming tower shimmered like cut crystal, and Kale couldn't shake the realization that his carefully managed military career had just veered into unknown territory. But as the children nestled closer, one on each side and one in his arms, he found himself thinking that maybe the unexpected was exactly where he was meant to be. Life in the sci-fi Imperial Palace was nothing like Kale Draven had imagined. It was both breathtakingly beautiful and suffocatingly complex, a living mosaic of artistry, politics, and silent power struggles. His assigned quarters were larger than any command center he had ever served in, draped in silks and crystalline light, guarded by soldiers who watched him with the dual purpose of protection and surveillance. But none of it mattered as much as the fact that Princess Sarah, the youngest, refused to sleep anywhere but in the chair beside his bed. More often than not, Kale awoke to find her curled against his chest like a small violet-shadowed cat. "She has nightmares," Elora explained one morning, seated primly by the window with a datapad much too advanced for her age. "Ever since Papa died, she doesn't like being alone in the dark." "What did she do before I arrived?" Kale asked, carefully shifting the sleeping child from his arm. "She usually went to Mama's chambers," Nira answered, entering with a tray of breakfast the palace staff had clearly prepared with his preferences in mind. "But now she says you keep the dreams away better." Kale's chest tightened. He hadn't meant to become a replacement for anything, or anyone. But the quiet trust of these children was no longer something he could dismiss. Later that morning, he attended his first council session with the Empress's senior advisors. Officially, it was about cultural exchange programs. In reality, it was an interrogation disguised as diplomacy. Commander Draven, Chancellor Vaynar, Vealora's chief advisor, began with oily courtesy. "Your extended presence here raises delicate questions of protocol and precedent." "I imagine it does," Kale replied evenly, hands clasped behind his back. "Though my primary concern remains the safety and well-being of the princesses. Everything else is secondary." "And therein lies the problem," Vaynar said smoothly. "Your attachment to the royal children, while touching, complicates matters. Many question whether a former enemy soldier should be afforded such intimate access to the imperial heirs." Before Kale could respond, the chamber doors opened. Every official in the room rose immediately as Empress Vealora entered. Her presence shifted the very air. Powerful beings who commanded entire fleets seemed to shrink before her. "What questions are these, Chancellor?" Vealora asked, golden eyes sweeping the table. "Security concerns, political ramifications." "Last night," Vealora interrupted, her tone calm yet absolute, "Princess Sarah slept peacefully through the night for the first time in 6 months. Princess Nira asked her tutors more questions about Terran culture than in all previous weeks combined." Princess Elora smiled. Truly smiled. "Tell me, Chancellor, do you still believe Commander Kale's presence is a complication?" Silence followed. Even the guards shifted uneasily. Before the Chancellor could stammer a reply, the palace alarms blared. Harsh, urgent tones vibrated through the crystal walls. Security breach in the royal wing, a voice announced over the comms. Unknown intruders, armed and hostile. All personnel, implement emergency protocols. The room erupted into motion. Guards formed protective lines, advisors whispered frantic orders, and General Karthos, the Empress's military chief, barked tactical commands. But Kale had only one thought, the children. He was already moving toward the exit. Commander Draven. General Karthos barked. You are a civilian guest. Remain here. With respect, General, Kale snapped, years of battlefield instinct overriding diplomacy, those children trust me to keep them safe. I'm not standing by while they're in danger. Commander. Let him go, Empress Veilora commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her gaze locked with Kale's. There was recognition in her eyes, and something like trust. Bring them to the secure chambers in the lower palace. You know the way. I'll find it, Your Majesty, Kale vowed. He reached the royal apartments faster than the security teams, his training carrying him through corridors now echoing with the clash of steel and the hiss of plasma fire. He found Elora, Nira, and Sarah huddled in Elora's chamber with their tutor, an elderly woman trembling with fear. Commander Kale. Sarah cried, launching herself into his arms. There are bad people in the palace. I know, Kale said, sweeping her close while scanning the room. But I'll get you somewhere safe. Can you be brave for me? We're always brave, Nira declared, though she stayed close to his side. Elora's chin lifted with solemn courage. Are you going to protect us like you did in the warehouse? Better than that, Kale promised. Because now I know all the best hiding spots. Getting 3 children and their tutor through a palace under siege demanded every ounce of his experience. He dodged patrols, used hidden maintenance corridors, and improvised with anything at hand. At one point distracting assassins with a triggered cleaning drone. At last, they reached the reinforced chambers deep below the palace, just as the all-clear sounded over the comms. Unknown assailants neutralized. Security restored. But the weight of the night wasn't lifted. Elora and Nira clung to him, while Sarah had fallen asleep against his chest mid-evacuation, her tiny hand clutching his collar. Moments later, the Empress arrived, armor scorched from battle but uninjured, her blade still humming faintly. Her eyes swept the scene, Kale with her daughters pressed close around him, and something in her expression softened. The intruders were assassins, she said grimly. Well trained. They knew our defenses. Someone inside gave them access. Kale felt cold certainty settle in his gut. Treachery. Veilora stepped closer, her voice firm but weighted with meaning. Commander Kale Draven, tonight you proved your loyalty beyond doubt. Before my own guards reached them, you carried my daughters to safety. For that, I offer you a place no outsider has ever held, personal protector to the royal heirs. With full authority and residence within the palace. Kale hesitated. Your Majesty, This role comes not only with resources and power, she interrupted, but with something far rarer. My daughter's complete trust. That cannot be commanded or bought. It must be earned. And you, Commander, have earned it. Looking down at Sarah sleeping peacefully in his arms, then at Elora and Nira's hopeful faces, Kale knew the truth. Somewhere along the way, this mission had stopped being about duty. It had become family. I accept, he said quietly. The Empress's smile was radiant with relief. Then welcome to our family, Commander. As they walked back through the now secured halls, Kale reflected that his life had just shifted more profoundly than any war ever had. He was no longer just a soldier. He was something far more dangerous, and far more precious. 6 months had passed since Commander Kale Draven had stumbled into an abandoned warehouse and found 3 frightened princesses hiding behind cargo crates. What had begun as a desperate search and rescue had transformed into something Kale could never have imagined, a life bound to the Imperial family not by orders, but by trust and love. He woke that morning as he often did, to the weight of little Sarah sprawled across his chest, her violet hair mussed, her tiny fist clutching his uniform. To his left, Nira snuggled into his side, while Elora sat in a nearby chair, quietly reading a text far too advanced for most grown officers. "Good morning, Captain Papa," Sarah mumbled sleepily into his shirt, using the nickname she had stubbornly invented months ago. "Good morning, little star," Kale said softly, adjusting to support her weight without disturbing Nira. "Didn't we agree you'd try your own bed?" "Tried," Sarah replied with 4-year-old logic. "But your room has better dreams." "The nightmares are gone now," Elora observed without looking up from her datapad. "Dr. Vetus says it's because she feels secure in her attachment relationships." "Dr. Vetus needs to use smaller words," Kale muttered, though he was impressed. Elora's mind was sharp, quick, and already reaching for responsibility far beyond her years. "And you, why are you reading tactical strategy manuals before breakfast?" "Because you said understanding defense helps protect Nira and Sarah," Elora answered simply. "And because Mama says knowledge is the best shield." Before Kale could respond, Nira stirred, her eyes immediately sharp with curiosity. "Captain Kale, are you going to marry Mama?" The question hit him harder than a plasma round. He froze. "Princess Nira, that's complicated." "Not really," she said with 6-year-old bluntness. "Do you love her?" Kale felt his chest tighten. There was no denying it anymore. "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." "Does she love you?" Elora pressed, gaze keen. Kale opened his mouth, then closed it again. He was a soldier who had faced death 1,000 times, yet somehow he was undone by 3 small voices demanding the truth. Before he could answer, another voice spoke from the doorway. "Girls," Empress Vealora said with a mixture of sternness and amusement, "I think that's enough cultural education for one morning." Kale turned sharply, suddenly aware that he was lying in bed with her 3 daughters draped across him like affectionate cats. "Your Majesty, I can explain." "Can you?" she teased lightly, stepping into the room with a grace that carried both command and warmth. "Because I'd love to hear how you explain the fact that my daughters have declared you their father. My court whispers endlessly, my guards defer to you more than their commanders, and half the palace believes you're either our greatest blessing or a Terran spy." Kale gently disentangled himself from the children, who protested half-heartedly, and stood to face her properly. "If my presence is causing problems, Your Majesty, I can." "The only problem," Vealora interrupted, settling into Elora's vacated chair, "is that some courtiers cannot accept that the strongest alliances are sometimes forged in love, not strategy." Kale blinked. "Love?" Her golden eyes held his, unwavering. "The love my daughters feel for you. The love I feel for a man who placed their safety above politics, who has proven again and again that our family is his priority." The words struck him with the force of truth. Sarah slid from his arms into her mother's lap but clung to his sleeve, listening with fierce attention. "Mama," she said solemnly, "can we keep Captain Papa forever?" "Forever is a long time, little star," Vealora murmured. "Commander Kale has his own life, his own people, his own duties." "But we're his people too now," Elora insisted, her voice trembling with the courage of conviction. "We're his family." Kale's throat constricted. Looking at the 3 children who had wrapped themselves around his heart, then at the woman who ruled an empire yet trusted him with her most precious treasures, he whispered, "Yes. You're my family. Then marry Mama and make it official." Nira burst out, her face bright with 6-year-old certainty. "That's how families work. The grown-ups marry, and nobody leaves." Kale's gaze met Vealora's. Her face was composed, but in her eyes he saw something raw, hope, fear, and longing. "Vealora," he said quietly, discarding titles. "Is that what you want?" Her reply came with a depth of honesty that made his chest ache. It's what I've wanted since the night you carried my daughters to safety. Especially because you are human. Especially because it proves that love is stronger than old hatreds, that families can bridge any divide. Kale knelt beside her chair, taking her hand gently in his. Vealora, I love you. I love Elora, Nira, and Sarah. I want to spend the rest of my life protecting you, cherishing you, being worthy of the trust you've given me. Will you marry me? Her smile was luminous, her voice steady. Yes. The room erupted in childish delight. Nira leapt onto the bed, shouting about cake and sparkles. Elora began listing ceremonial traditions. Sarah climbed into Kale's arms and whispered, "Forever family." Kale kissed Vealora softly, feeling the weight of battle scars, of years of walls, fall away. He had gone from enemy soldier to protector, from protector to family. And now, royal consort, husband, father in all but blood. Outside, the twin sons of Zera Prime painted the palace towers in gold and violet fire. Inside, Kale Draven discovered that sometimes the greatest victories were not won in war, but in the quiet, stubborn power of love. And that's how Commander Kale Draven's life transformed from hardened warrior to beloved guardian, and finally into family. A man who once believed detachment was survival learned instead that trust, love, and connection were the most powerful shields of all. Across the vastness of space, we often imagine victory as something measured in battles won or enemies defeated. But Kale's story reminds us that sometimes the most important victories are far more personal, measured in the safety of children, in the warmth of a home, and in the courage to open your heart when it's easier to remain closed. Elora, Nira, and Sarah would forever remember the night they got lost in the industrial maze and found not just a rescuer, but a father figure who taught them that safety could come from the unlikeliest of places. And Empress Vealora, a ruler who carried the weight of a galaxy, discovered that even empires can be reshaped by something as simple, as extraordinary, as love. For Kale, the journey was never about duty alone, it was about choosing to stand firm for those who needed him most, even when it defied his training, even when it complicated his life beyond recognition. In the end, those complications became his greatest joy. So if you've stayed with me through this story, I want to leave you with this thought: sometimes the detours, the unexpected turns we never planned for, lead us exactly where we were meant to be. Thank you for listening to this tale of war, peace, and family among the stars. If you enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with friends who love epic sci-fi with a heart. Your support helps us keep telling stories that explore not just distant galaxies, but the deepest parts of what makes us human.